to read the NGH mission statement.
Thank you. To improve the health and wellness of Nashville by providing equitable access to coordinated patient-centered care, supporting tomorrow's caregivers, and translating science into clinical practice.
Thank you very much. As always, it's a public meeting and the public has an opportunity to make comments before we get started with our business. Janet, do we have any public comments?
No, sir.
Thank you. Then we'll move on. The first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from our previous meeting. You've received a copy in advance of the meeting. I hope everyone has had a chance to review. Is there a motion to approve our previous minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Yes.
Is there any discussion? If not, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of approving our previous meeting minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so that brings us to old business. There's no old business on our agenda, so we'll move right to new business. And I'm very pleased to report that we have made some significant progress since our last meeting on the search for a CEO search firm. You've received some materials that I want to walk through first substantively, and then after we have reviewed that and discussed any questions or comments people have on that, then I think the second thing we want to do is talk about the process and where this goes from here. The Metro Government Procurement Office announced on Friday the award, or I should say the tentative award to a search firm to assist us in our CEO search. The winner of that process was AMN Leadership Solutions, which this committee is familiar with. That's an entity that has worked with the hospital before, and they are the awardee as a result of this process. The first document I want to walk through is this one, which is called the Notice of Intent to Award. This is the formal document that announces the award and gives all the bidders information about the evaluation committee's work, the scoring, and how the RFP process resulted in this notice of award. And so what you will see is the first sort of substantive part of this gives at the top a summary of the points that were available and the points that were awarded by the committee for each of three criteria. And each of those criteria is weighted in a different way. So 40 points were available for bidders' responses for qualifications and experience. 30 points were available for their methodology and approach. And 30 points were available based on the cost proposal that they made. And so what you have there is a chart with what the evaluation committee and the RFP process, the points that they assign to each of the proposals in each of these categories. Those are all totaled up into a total points, and the best perfect score being 100. And the notice of intent to award goes to the bidder who received the highest point total. The way this worked was that the evaluation committee received all of the proposals and had several weeks to review them. Each of the committee members independently came to their own assessment of the points for each of these categories. And then the committee met together several times to talk about their individual evaluations and discussion about each of the proposals, things that were favorable, things that we thought were lacking, and as a result of that process came up with a set of consensus scores for each of these categories for each of these bidders. And we had 10 bidders, and these are the rankings based on that process. What follows after that is a summary so that bidders understand in general terms what the strengths and weaknesses were for each proposal. And so that's for the bidders to understand how the evaluation committee came to their conclusions. The last page in the notice of award shows you how the cost proposal was scored. The way this is done is strictly mathematical formula. The total points that are available are 30 points, and the bidder that submits the lowest cost gets all 30 points. And then all of the other bidders' scoring for the cost proposal is based on how far away they were each from the lowest cost bid. So all of those numbers that you see in there are based on a formula. And so the committee doesn't use any subjective, the evaluation committee doesn't use any subjective measurement for cost. That is strictly a formula based on the cost that each bidder submitted. Okay, so let me stop there and just see if there are any questions or comments that people have about the notice of intent to award.
Could you explain the column for contract exceptions, yes and no?
Contract exceptions are a place where the bidder has proposed to make a change to what we requested in the RFP. Some of them being technical, some of them being more substantive. So it's just to highlight for the evaluation committee where a good example doesn't come to mind, but I'll use one that I don't think is an actual example. But say we had a timeline for the search and we asked bidders to perform their services within X number of months. If a bidder responded and said, we can't do it within X number of months, but we would offer to do it within Y number of months, that would be a contract exception. And it may or may not knock them out of the running, but it highlights for the committee that there are things to look out for where somebody has proposed something that is slightly different than what we've asked for. All right, the next set of materials that I've given you is, it's a whole lot of materials for every bidder's proposal. So I don't want to overwhelm the committee, but because if the award goes through and we work with AMN as our CEO search firm, I wanted you to be able to see what their proposal was and how they are going to approach the CEO search. And I realize that you've just gotten these materials this morning. Things have been moving fairly quickly in the last week or so. So we had talked with AMN at a previous meeting before we decided to stop and open this process up to a number of bidders, anyone who was interested. So I think from that meeting, you may have a sense, my reading of their proposal is that it was similar to what we had talked about with them. But here's where they have put in detail the people who are going to be assigned to us, who we're going to work with most closely at AMN as part of this process, what their approach will be to the search, and also gives some of their qualifications, similar searches they've done. So what you have here is responsive to very particular questions that we asked in the RFP, but it will probably be helpful for you if we move forward with AMN to review this, because it will give you a very specific idea of how it is that they intend to approach this search, what their qualifications are, and who the people are that we're going to be working with. But if anybody's had a chance to look through that and wants to talk about anything in particular, we can. Or I think, the main thing for getting this to you now is so that you have it, so that in a subsequent meeting, if the contract moves forward with AMN, we'll be educated as to how they are proposing to do this.
Well, I'd like to say that I feel very good in the sense that this has been done, the requests for proposals. And so, and we have a sense of what is available and what has been deemed and measured to be in our best interest. So, thank you for this portion, even though it's been laborious, but, I think it's very important that we went through this process.
Yes, thank you, and I agree. I think we got a range. We had 10 respondents, which is a lot of respondents, so there was a lot of interest to work with us on this. And I think you could fairly characterize the 10 as being really a good variety of types of firms that had different types of approaches, and several of them are very large, prominent firms in this space. Some of them were less prominent and less well-known, but they all submitted proposals, and it was a really good exercise to go through and make sure that we're getting the right firm that fits our needs, and I'm also glad it was, and also the evaluation committee, as I've described before, was a cross-section of hospital leaders, and I served as the board's representative on that committee. And so I think we've solicited good proposals, but we also had the input of members of the executive leadership team, which I think is also good to make sure that all of us as a board and as an executive leadership team are comfortable and happy with our partners who are going to help us with this search.
And the document for methodology and approach, is this in any way different from what we have learned from this company in the past? If you've had a chance to review this.
I did review this and all the proposals as part of my work on the evaluation committee team, and my reading of the proposal that they submitted is that it doesn't differ from what they had described to us before we opened this up for all bidders to submit responses. I think the key focus of their methodology is on page 4, and it's also the most practical thing to look at, which is their time frame and their schedule for how they see the CEO search firm going. And you'll see that they anticipate a 14-week process from committee kickoff meeting, which would be their first meeting with us, through offer negotiation. But this is their proposal. That is subject to this committee's input and discussions with them if they are awarded the contract for us to go through. I think 14 weeks seems reasonable, although, as I've said before, and we've had some discussion, I think that we really want to make sure that we invest on the front end in a significant effort to get input from the board, from hospital staff, from hospital leadership, and from community partners and stakeholders, of which we have a lot, because I think that is going to be really important for us to make sure that we've got the broadest possible input from the community and from stakeholders about what are the skills that we need, the talents that are going to be important for the next CEO. So I would wonder whether that part of the process may be longer than they've anticipated, but this is what they've laid out, and you can, on page 4, you got a pretty good outline of what they see is going, and I think it's consistent with what they told us before we started this process.
Just a question about the process of approving the recommendation that we use this firm. I assume the board needs to approve that, and is it necessary for this? If we had a goal of having bringing this before the board at their meeting this month, would that require that this committee approve this recommendation today?
Yes, I think so, and that would be my plan. That's really our action item today, is the timeline for approval. The board does need to approve this contract because it meets our criteria for board approval. Because the board charged this committee to oversee this process, I think we should make a recommendation to the board if we want to recommend this award to do that. I would like to do that at this meeting because that will allow the board to approve the contract at our November meeting. And part of the reason for that timeline is that because the board doesn't meet in December, if we don't act on this now, then we won't have a contract in place until January. And I think we all had wished this part of the process had gone faster, but it took the time. Procurement takes time, but we really want to keep moving. So that would be my hope, and we can talk about it and then vote on it. I need to sort of explain the thing that is going to be happening at the same time as we're doing our approval process. Because this is a public procurement, we're a public entity, there are provisions of this process that allow for bidders who did not receive the award to file a protest and to contest and point out if they think there were any flaws in the process. And that's a legal requirement. There's a 10-day period for any bidder who is not the awardee to file that protest, and then there's a process to hear that process within Metro Procurement. So that period will end on Monday. It's a 10-day period that started on Friday when the award was announced. And so our recommendation, number one, would be contingent on, and the ability for the board to approve a contract would depend on whether anyone files a protest, because that will cause us, we would have no choice at that point but to pause and wait for that process to play out. So that's an unknown right now. The second thing is that we can't negotiate the exact terms of the agreement until that process is done. If the 10-day period passes and there is no protest, then the notice of award is final, and the next thing that would happen is Metro Legal, Metro Procurement, and the Evaluation Committee would meet with AMN to work out any particular terms of the agreement. That is not a full-fledged contract negotiation, because the reason to conduct an RFP is to let all the potential bidders know in advance of what the terms of the contract are, what the cost is going to be, and you can't go through that process, select a winner, and then negotiate something different than what you've bid on. So the contract has to be conformed, in any substantive way with what their proposal was, and especially what their cost proposal was. So the negotiation of the final terms of the contract could be, technical matters or, particular contract provisions that are not essential to the substance of the proposal, but that also has to happen. We've scheduled a meeting with AMN that involves Metro Legal and Metro Procurement to talk about those terms and finalize an exact written agreement that would go before the board. And that meeting is scheduled to be a week from today, which is right after the protest period ends. So any recommendation that we make to approve would be to approve the contract as it is particularly negotiated next week. And we would have the final terms of a written agreement for the board to review, but this committee's recommendation would essentially be to approve the contract, approve recommendation of the contract based on the terms that were bid, but without the final contract with every I dotted, every T crossed.
And that final contract will not be decided on next Monday.
It will be decided, I hope that will be decided on next Wednesday.
Okay.
I hope, but my expectation is that because the contract has to conform to what was bid, that there will be, what's an example? A technical requirement might be the amount of insurance that is required for the, if there is something, or if there's some format in which they are going to produce reports. I mean, it would have to be something, any negotiation would be something that would be marginal, not essential to any of these terms.
So is it possible, let's see, so it's possible that there will be a final contract before the board next Thursday. But we won't be able to get that contract to the board, and are we not required to get that contract to the board 5 business days ahead of time?
Well, obviously, I would defer that to Derek for sure, but what I understand is it has to be on the agenda, and since we already know the cost, the terms, we can put that on the agenda as a voting item for the board. That's what I
just want
understand.
to make sure
I
that
would have to ask
we do
the attorneys.
everything we can
Yeah,
to approve everything we can next Thursday so that it doesn't get delayed for 2 months.
I defer that to the attorney, so that's beyond me.
That is the reason to sequence it this way, which is if we wait and say here for this committee is the final terms of the contract, then we won't be able to have it on the board's agenda, and this process will have to move over until January. And I don't think that this is I don't think we're rushing it or doing anything that is premature, because, as I say, in this context, the finalization of the contract is very technical. And I don't think that any of the provisions that are going to be in the contract are ones that the board is, at the board level, are going to change any of the fundamentals of this agreement.
So would you just repeat or frame what the recommendation or the process is, so that?
Yeah, the recommendation is that we would, as a committee, consider a motion to recommend approval to the board of the contract with AMN to serve as the CEO search firm, knowing that the particulars of the contract are going to be negotiated, and the contract itself will be available, of course, to the board for its review at its next meeting.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries, and the contract is recommended for approval to the board. Okay. I guess the last item of business that I have is then to think about what our next step is. This committee next meets on December 10, because otherwise our meeting would fall the day before Thanksgiving. And if everything goes as we've talked about, and there is no protest, and the contract is finalized, and the board approves it at our November meeting, then I would expect our December 10 meeting would be the kickoff meeting that AMN would come and join us, and we would ask them at that meeting to take us through what our next steps are. How do we start, and what is our timeline for actually conducting the CEO search, which would be really exciting to get that done, and I look forward to that part of the process. Thank you. Okay. All right. Well, I was glad to be able to convene a meeting with good news and forward movement. But at this stage, that's where we are. Is there That's all the business we have on our agenda. Does any member of the committee have any other item we should consider? All right, is there a motion to adjourn? There's a motion and a second. We're adjourned. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.